HOA President Karen Whitmore, bleach blonde control freak, called 911 on me because I changed my Wi-Fi name. Worst mistake she ever made. 6 months after burying my wife, all I wanted was peace. Instead, Karen fined me $75 for grass half an inch too long, $100 because my mailbox was the wrong black, and tried to kill my only lifeline, my ham radio antenna. So I renamed my Wi-Fi Karen Whitmore Isa Control Freak. Karen lost it completely. Heels stomping, cheap perfume cloud screaming cyber harassment straight to 911. Cops showed up confused while she demanded my arrest. I just stood there holding my wife's coffee mug, thinking this was rock bottom. Then one officer asked Karen a simple question that made her face drain white. Everything changed in that moment. What would you do? Drop your craziest HOA story below. Where you watching from? Like if you're team anti-Karen. Sub for what happens next. That officer's question changed everything. But to understand why Karen Whitmore went from neighborhood dictator to begging felon in 30 seconds, let me take you back 6 months to where this nightmare began. I'm Miles Delacroix, 52, spent 30 years installing fiber networks for Verizon. Good marriage, quiet life. Then pancreatic cancer stole my Sarah after 28 years together. The Phoenix house felt haunted by memories, so I cashed out my pension and moved to Willowbrook Estates, Arizona. Just wanted to grieve in peace. My only lifeline? Ham radio. Call sign K7MDX. When you're drowning in silence, there's something magical about voices crackling through static at 3 a.m. Operators in Tokyo, truckers in Nebraska, anyone willing to talk to a broken man learning to breathe again. Then I met the Wicked Witch of the Southwest, Karen Whitmore. Imagine a soccer mom who peaked in high school and never recovered. Bleached blonde bob, pastel pantsuits, white Escalade with vanity plates, HOA-1. Shares 6 years as HOA president, ruling our little suburb like her personal dictatorship. Day 3. I'm unpacking boxes when those stiletto heels start clicking up my driveway like a death march. The perfume cloud hit first. Cheap lavender so thick you could taste the artificial sweetness on your tongue. Behind it came Karen, clutching her clipboard like it contained nuclear launch codes. Welcome to my neighborhood, she announces, voice sharp enough to cut glass. We have serious problems. Problems? Lady, I hadn't even found my coffee maker yet. She slaps down a violation notice on yellow paper so rough it felt like tree bark against my fingertips. Your grass exceeds maximum height by 0.6 inches, $75 fine. I walked Mrs. Rosalie's yard later that evening. Her grass was taller than a wheat field with dandelions sprouting like tiny yellow flags of rebellion. No violation notice in sight. Funny how that works. Week 2 brought the mailbox massacre. Wrong shade of black, $100. I spent that afternoon driving around, counting 17 different shades of black mailboxes, from charcoal to midnight to basic flat black. Guess whose was the only wrong one? But Karen saved her nuclear option for week 3, my ham radio antenna. That eyesore destroys property values, she declared, acrylic nails drumming her clipboard like a machine gun. The sound echoed off my garage door, tick, 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 tick. Section 4.7 prohibits unsightly external equipment. Time for some education. Federal Communications Commission regulations always override local HOA rules for licensed amateur radio operators. The FCC's PRB1 ruling specifically prevents local authorities from blocking effective amateur radio communications. Simple takeaway: federal law beats local bullies every single time. I explained this carefully to her. Ever try teaching quantum physics to a goldfish? Same energy. I don't give a damn about federal law, she snarled, her voice rising to that pitch only dogs and desperate housewives can hear. This is my kingdom, and that thing's coming down, or you're getting fined into bankruptcy. That's when the pieces clicked. This wasn't about grass height or mailbox colors or antenna aesthetics. Karen had profiled me from day one. Widower with work truck and electronics equipment equals neighborhood problem requiring elimination. The harassment campaign began immediately. Karen's Escalade became my daily soundtrack. She'd cruise by like a predatory shark, camera phone clicking away as she documented every angle of my property. Her sickly sweet perfume would linger in my driveway after each inspection. mixing with Arizona desert heat to create this nauseating mirage of artificial flowers and automotive exhaust. Other neighbors started whispering about her visits. Always the same interrogation. What do you know about the new guy? Any financial troubles, criminal background? Why did he really move here? Karen was building some kind of case, but for what? Then came that fateful evening. I was sitting at my kitchen table with Sarah's favorite coffee mug, the ceramic still holding traces of her vanilla creamer scent even months later, when I decided to have some harmless fun. Opened my router settings and changed the Wi-Fi name from Netgear 47291 to Karen Whitmore is a control freak. Just a little joke, right? Maybe she'd get the hint. Instead, I accidentally triggered the chain reaction that would expose the biggest fraud in suburban Arizona history. Karen spotted my new Wi-Fi name within hours. How do I know? Because at 6:47 a.m. sharp, those stiletto heels were machine gunning up my driveway like she was leading a cavalry charge. I cracked open the door in my bathrobe, steam rising from my coffee mug in the cool desert morning air, to find Karen's face glowing redder than a phoenix sunset. Her usually pristine blonde bob looked like she'd stuck her finger in an electrical socket. First crack I'd ever seen in her suburban armor. "Change it. Now," she demanded, thrusting her iPhone at my face like evidence in a murder trial. There on her Wi-Fi list sat my masterpiece, Karen Whitmore Eyes a Control Freak, nestled between Netflix and chill and FBI_surveillance_van_3. "Change what exactly?" I asked, savoring both my coffee and the moment. "That's slander!" Her shriek could have registered on seismic equipment. "It's harassment, defamation, I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, closing the door. "Big mistake, Karen." 23 minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. Sergeant Rodriguez looked like he'd rather be chasing actual criminals, while Officer Rosalie appeared ready to document the entire neighborhood's breakfast routine. The sound of their boots crunching on my gravel driveway mixed with Karen's frantic heel-clicking created this weird percussion symphony of suburban drama. Karen was positioned in my front yard like a general commanding troops, clipboard clutched against her chest like body armor. "Officers, thank God, this man is cyber-stalking me with electronic terrorism." Rodriguez's weathered face showed exactly zero patience. "Ma'am, what's the specific threat?" "He weaponized his Wi-Fi against me." Chen pulled out his phone, checked the local networks, and I watched his expression shift from serious to confused to slightly amused. "Ma'am, I see the network name, but control freak isn't threatening language. It's an opinion." That's when my 30 years in telecommunications came flooding back. I'd sat through countless FCC training sessions about public airwave broadcasts versus private communications. Rodriguez confirmed what I already knew. Wi-Fi identifiers broadcast on public frequencies aren't harassment unless they contain explicit threats. The color drained from Karen's face like someone had pulled a plug. She looked around desperately, probably hoping for backup that wasn't coming. But here's where I played my ace card. "Officers, since you're here documenting harassment claims, maybe you could help me understand something." I ducked inside and returned with the manila folder I'd been building since day one, my insurance policy against exactly this moment. I spread 17 violation notices across my truck hood, each one dated and photographed alongside evidence of identical violations throughout the neighborhood. Mrs. Rosalie's 3-inch grass growing wild as a prairie. The Johnsons' bright blue mailbox that screamed, "Look at me!" Mike Patterson's satellite dish bigger than a small aircraft. 17 violations in 3 weeks, I said calmly. 0 citations for identical violations on other properties. Rodriguez studied the photos like he was examining crime scene evidence. His entire demeanor shifted. "This appears to be selective enforcement." From my telecommunications days, I remembered reading about Arizona's fair housing statutes during a discrimination training seminar. The law was crystal clear. HOA rules must be applied equally to all residents, or the enforcement becomes legally invalid harassment. You can't pick and choose who gets punished for the same behavior. Chen was scribbling notes furiously. "Sir, do you have documentation proving other residents weren't cited for these same violations?" "Every single one," I replied, pulling out time-stamped photos covering 6 blocks of our subdivision. Karen's panic sweat was now overpowering her lavender perfume, creating this nauseating cocktail that reminded me of a funeral home trying too hard to mask the smell of death. Her acrylic nails drummed against her clipboard like nervous machine gun fire. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said, turning to face Karen with cop eyes that had seen every con game in the book. "Selective enforcement of community rules can constitute harassment. You might want to reconsider your approach here." That's when I saw real fear flash across Karen's face. Not embarrassment or anger, genuine terror, like someone who just realized they'd been playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun. "Officers, perhaps we've all misunderstood each other," she stammered, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Maybe we can handle this internally." Rodriguez handed me his card. "Sir, selective harassment is taken seriously regardless of who's doing it. Call if this continues." As the patrol car pulled away, Karen stood in my driveway looking like someone had just explained that her entire worldview was built on quicksand. The untouchable neighborhood dictator had just been educated on actual law by actual law enforcement. She shuffled back to her house without another word, but I could practically hear her brain working overtime. This wasn't surrender, this was strategic retreat. Karen Whitmore was planning her counterattack, and I was about to discover just how dirty she was willing to fight. Karen's revenge arrived exactly 1 week later, delivered by certified mail with the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the skull. Special maintenance assessment, immediate payment required. $1,200 per household, due in 30 days. But here's where Karen got creative and stupid. My bill was different. $2,847 for enhanced enforcement monitoring and administrative burden created by non-compliant resident behavior. I sat at my kitchen table, the cheap yellow paper crackling between my fingers like dry kindling, and started laughing. Actually laughing. The bitter irony tasted like copper pennies on my tongue. Sarah would have called this Karen's hold my beer moment, the point where someone's ego writes checks their brain can't cash. The phone started ringing within hours. Mrs. Rosalie first. "Miles, did you get this insane bill? $1,200 for what maintenance?" Her voice carried that particular pitch of elderly outrage that could strip paint. Then Tom Patterson, the CPA from 3 houses down. "This assessment makes zero financial sense. Where's the breakdown, the receipts, the justification?" Karen had made her first tactical error. She'd united the entire neighborhood against her while handing me a paper trail that screamed fraud louder than her morning tantrums. Time for some detective work. Back in my union days, I'd learned that Arizona requires HOAs to provide complete financial records to any homeowner who requests them. Transparency laws exist specifically to prevent what Karen was attempting. So I fired off a certified letter demanding 3 years of complete financial documentation, return receipt requested. Karen's response? Pure bureaucratic warfare. Delays, excuses, and documents so heavily redacted they looked like classified NSA files. Black bars everywhere, missing pages, convenient copying errors that made numbers impossible to verify. The smell of fresh toner mixed with whiteout correction fluid created this weird chemical cocktail that made my garage workspace feel like a counterfeit operation. But 30 years installing fiber networks teaches you something crucial. Communication systems always leave traces. Karen might have blacked out the important parts, but she couldn't hide the metadata. Payment schedules, vendor names, approval dates, all the digital breadcrumbs that tell the real story. That's when I spotted the smoking gun. Whitmore Property Solutions, $15,000, landscape consultation. My fingers started tingling the way they used to when I'd find a break in a fiber optic cable. I pulled up the county assessor's website and cross-referenced business registration records. Guess who owned Whitmore Property Solutions? And guess whose property had sprouted a brand new irrigation system, professional landscaping, and a stone retaining wall over the past year? Karen had been paying herself with our money. The corruption stench was stronger than desert creosote after a thunderstorm. I spread the evidence across my dining room table, papers rustling like autumn leaves as I mapped every suspicious payment, every convenient emergency expense, every contractor sharing business addresses with Karen's known associates. The pattern emerged like a Polaroid developing. Systematic, deliberate theft disguised as community improvement. My smartest move was recruiting Tom Patterson. Retired CPA, sharp as a switchblade, and angrier than a sidewinder about that bogus assessment. I invited him over one evening, the air conditioning humming while we examined the evidence under my LED desk lamp. "Sweet mother of God, Miles," he whispered, his trained accountant's eye tracking down columns of numbers. She's been embezzling for years. Every major assessment correlates with personal improvements to her property. This is textbook self-dealing. Tom's expertise translated what I was seeing into legal language. When board members vote on contracts that personally benefit them, they violate their fiduciary duty and commit fraud under Arizona corporate law. The math was simple. Karen steals community funds, increases her property value, then bills everyone else for the privilege. But Karen wasn't finished escalating. While I built my case, she was building hers through a door-to-door character assassination campaign. That familiar perfume cloud would drift through the neighborhood as she visited house after house, clipboard armed with leading questions. What do you really know about Miles? Why Arizona? Any financial troubles? Criminal history? Mrs. Rosalie described Karen's fishing expedition over morning coffee, her weathered hands trembling with indignation. She wanted to know if you seemed mentally unstable, if you'd made me uncomfortable. I told her you were the kindest neighbor I'd had in 20 years. She looked genuinely disappointed. The harassment was expanding, but so was my evidence collection. Every conversation, every invasive question, every attempt to manufacture dirt, it all went into my growing file documenting her criminal behavior. Then Karen delivered her masterstroke, an emergency board meeting to discuss my removal from the community for persistent disruptive behavior. The meeting notice felt like sandpaper against my palm as I read the trumped-up charges. Electronic harassment, community standards violations, hostile environment creation, and fundamental incompatibility with neighborhood values. Karen was trying to exile me from my own home, but she'd made one fatal mistake. In her desperation to destroy me, she'd stopped covering her tracks. The woman who'd spent years carefully concealing embezzlement was now making panicked moves that generated evidence faster than I could document it. I stared at that meeting notice and smiled, because while Karen was playing HOA politics, I'd been talking to FBI agent Sarah Martinez about federal wire fraud statutes. The emergency board meeting was set for Thursday night, but Karen couldn't contain her detective fantasies that long. By Tuesday morning, she was conducting a neighborhood investigation tour that would have made the FBI jealous, if it wasn't so hilariously incompetent. I watched through my kitchen window as she worked the street, that white Escalade prowling from house to house like a suburban shark. The morning sun caught her windshield as she parked, gathered her clipboard arsenal, and strutted up each driveway with the confidence of someone who'd watched too many cop shows. Mrs. Rosalie called around 10, her voice vibrating with outrage. Miles, that lunatic just spent 30 minutes interrogating me like I was harboring a fugitive. Wanted to know about your finances, mental health, why you really moved to Arizona. I told her she could mind her own damn business or get off my property. Tom Patterson texted an hour later. Karen just left my place, asked if I'd noticed concerning behavioral patterns or signs of criminal instability. Pretty sure she's building a dossier to have you committed. But here's where Karen stepped on the biggest landmine in the neighborhood. She decided to recruit Mike Patterson for her amateur investigation. Mike Patterson, no relation to Tom, just our subdivision's unfortunate naming coincidence, happened to be a retired Phoenix PD detective. 25 years working financial crimes before trading his badge for garden shears. When Karen knocked on his door with her little Nancy Drew routine, she'd just asked a professional investigator to help her investigate the wrong person. Mike called me that afternoon, his cop voice still carrying that "I've seen every scam" authority. Miles, grab that evidence folder and get over here. Karen just made the mistake of her criminal career. I found Mike in his garage, the concrete floor cleaner than most people's kitchens, tools arranged with military precision on pegboard walls. The familiar cocktail of motor oil, WD-40, and fresh coffee reminded me of honest work, something Karen wouldn't recognize if it bit her bleached behind. Your HOA president has interesting theories about you, Mike said, settling into a lawn chair that squeaked like a rusty gate. She thinks you're running some kind of high-tech criminal operation. I spread my evidence folder across his immaculate workbench, the papers rustling under bright fluorescent lights. What kind of operation? Identity theft, electronic fraud, using your telecom background for illegal surveillance. Mike's weathered face showed the expression of a detective who'd heard every half-baked criminal theory ever invented. She suggested your move to Arizona was suspicious, and your ham radio equipment could monitor private communications. The irony was so thick you could have spread it on toast. Karen was accusing me of exactly the crimes she'd been committing for years, just with different technology. "Here's where it gets good," Mike continued, leaning forward with predatory interest. "When I asked for specific evidence of your alleged criminal behavior, she had nothing, just feelings and concerns. But when I casually mentioned HOA financial transparency, she got defensive faster than a cornered rattlesnake." That's when I showed Mike my Whitmore Property Solutions discovery. His detective instincts activated like a bloodhound catching a scent, and suddenly we were connecting dots I hadn't even noticed. Bank records from the county clerk, business registration documents, insurance claims cross-referenced with HOA expenditures. The garage filled with the sound of rustling papers as Mike worked, occasionally muttering things like "classic self-dealing pattern" and "textbook fraud indicators." His trained eye spotted details my telecom background had missed. "Holy shit, Miles," he breathed, holding up a particularly damning insurance form. The paper trembled slightly in his grip. She filed a claim with State Farm for the same roof repair the HOA paid Whitmore Property Solutions to fix. That's dual billing, insurance fraud 101. The criminal web was more sophisticated than I'd imagined. Karen hadn't just embezzled HOA funds. She'd been running a multi-layered scam. Bill the HOA for emergency repairs, then file insurance claims for the same work. Double dip on every major property improvement while sticking the neighbors with both the assessment costs and higher insurance premiums. "This isn't neighborhood drama anymore," Mike said, his cop brain already 3 moves ahead. "We're looking at organized fraud across multiple financial institutions. Mail fraud for the false documentation, wire fraud for electronic transfers, insurance fraud for dual claims. This is federal crime territory, and it's been running for years." That evening, while Karen was probably rehearsing her character assassination presentation, I was on the phone with FBI agent Sarah Martinez. Mike had made the introduction. Apparently, they'd collaborated on several white-collar cases during his detective days. Agent Martinez listened with the patience of someone who'd heard every financial crime story ever told, occasionally asking clarifying questions in that careful way federal agents speak when they're already building prosecutorial timelines. "Mr. Delacroix," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority, "what you're describing matches patterns we've been tracking in HOA fraud cases across Arizona. How quickly can you provide digital copies of your evidence?" The next morning, I uploaded 3 years of Karen's criminal enterprise to a secure FBI server. Bank records, fraudulent invoices, dual insurance claims, board minutes where she voted herself money. The evidence package was so comprehensive it took 53 minutes to upload on my fiber connection. Let Karen hold her emergency meeting Thursday night. Let her present whatever character assassination material she'd manufactured. While she played neighborhood politics, I'd just handed the FBI a federal case that would put her away for a decade. The hunter had officially become the hunted. Now we're back to that moment from the beginning, the one that changed everything. Thursday night's emergency board meeting had been a spectacular disaster for Karen. 3 residents walked out when she started reading from her Miles Delacroix criminal profile. Tom Patterson publicly called her financial assessment mathematically impossible and potentially fraudulent. Even Deborah Finch, her loyal lapdog treasurer, looked physically uncomfortable when Karen suggested I might be a domestic terrorist using radio equipment for neighborhood surveillance. But Karen wasn't ready to surrender. Friday morning found her pacing her front yard like a caged predator, phone glued to her ear, that familiar perfume cloud drifting across the morning air thick enough to choke a horse. Through my kitchen window, I caught fragments of her increasingly frantic conversations. Electronic harassment, needs immediate intervention, community safety at risk. The desert morning was dead calm, that eerie silence you get before monsoon storms, when even the cactus wrens stop chattering. That's when Karen made the call that would destroy her completely. 911, what's your emergency? I need officers immediately for electronic terrorism and cyberstalking. Even from inside my house, I could hear the dispatcher's confusion crackling through the phone speaker. Ma'am, can you clarify what you mean by electronic terrorism? My neighbor is using Wi-Fi networks to psychologically torture me. This is warfare. 23 minutes later, our familiar duo returned. Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the patrol car looking like a man contemplating early retirement, while Officer Rosalie approached with his notepad ready for the sequel nobody wanted to see. Karen positioned herself in my front yard like a general commanding troops, clipboard clutched against her chest, pointing at my house with the dramatic flair of someone accusing me of harboring weapons of mass destruction. "Officers, thank you for your rapid response," she began, her voice honey-sweet with false gratitude. "This man's electronic stalking campaign has escalated despite your previous intervention." Rodriguez's weathered face showed exactly zero enthusiasm as his tired eyes met mine. I emerged from my house, still carrying Sarah's ceramic coffee mug, the one that always made that soft clink against my wedding ring when I gripped it too tightly. "Sir, has anything changed with your Wi-Fi situation since our last visit?" "Nope. Still Karen Whitmore, eyes a control freak." "Ma'am," Rosalie said with the patience of a kindergarten teacher, "we've already explained that network names aren't harassment unless they contain explicit threats." But Karen had prepared for this round. She produced a manila folder thick as a phone book, packed with printed screenshots, violation notices, even aerial photos of my antenna that she'd apparently taken from a drone. "Officers, this represents a documented pattern of targeted electronic intimidation, and I have evidence proving escalating criminal behavior." That's when Rodriguez surprised everyone. He pulled out his metal notepad, the pen clicking against his badge with that distinctive metallic ping that cops make when they're about to get serious. The morning air carried the faint smell of cooling asphalt, and Karen's nervous sweat mixing with her lavender perfume into something resembling a funeral home air freshener. "Ma'am, before we can process your complaint, I need to verify some information for our incident report." Karen's face transformed like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Finally, someone was treating her with the respect she deserved. "What's your full legal name and current residential address?" "Karen Marie Whitmore, 1247 Desert Sage Drive." Rodriguez scribbled something down, then looked up with those cop eyes that had interrogated every variety of criminal Phoenix could produce. The silence stretched between them like a rubber band about to snap. "Ma'am, is this your current address? Because our system shows you've registered at 3 different locations this year." The color drained from Karen's face like someone had pulled a drain plug. What?" Her voice cracked like desert hardpan in summer heat. "We show Karen Marie Whitmore at Desert Sage Drive, but also a P.O. box in Scottsdale and an apartment complex in Tempe. Which address receives your legal correspondence?" Karen's mouth worked soundlessly, opening and closing like a landed fish. The confidence, the authority, the righteous fury, all evaporating in real time. "There's been some mistake," she whispered. "Ma'am, we also have multiple outstanding warrants for failure to appear in civil proceedings. Have you been deliberately avoiding legal service?" That's when Karen's world collapsed. Her knees buckled and she dropped right there on my gravel driveway, the sound of her body hitting stone mixing with her sobbing as mascara streaked down her face like black tears. "Please," she gasped, looking up at me with the desperation of someone watching their entire life crumble. "Please don't press charges. I have children. I made mistakes, but I'm not a real criminal." Except she absolutely was. And that one simple question about her address had just pulled the thread that unraveled everything. The moment those patrol cars disappeared around the corner, Karen's suburban kingdom officially became a federal crime scene, and I was about to get a crash course in how the FBI hunts white-collar criminals. Agent Sarah Martinez called within 2 hours of Karen's warrant arrest, her voice carrying that particular federal authority that makes local problems suddenly feel like international incidents. "Mr. Delacroix, we've reviewed your evidence package. Congratulations, you've accidentally uncovered the largest HOA fraud network in Arizona history." That word network made my stomach drop like a broken elevator. Karen hadn't just been stealing from us. This was organized crime with perfectly manicured nails and HOA bylaws. "We're opening a full investigation," Martinez continued, "and we need your help. Your technical background makes you the perfect translator between Karen's crimes and what a jury can understand." Within 48 hours, my dining room looked like a cross between NASA mission control and a CPA's nightmare. Agent Martinez and IRS criminal investigator David Rosalie had transformed my quiet grief sanctuary into federal investigation headquarters. The smell of fresh printer toner mixed with government-grade coffee created this bureaucratic atmosphere that reminded me of Air Force contractor meetings where million-dollar mistakes were discussed over stale donuts. My job? Make Karen's financial crimes simple enough for 12 jurors who probably couldn't balance their own checkbooks. Think of Whitmore Property Solutions like a rogue cell tower, I explained to Agent Martinez, spreading bank records across my table like battlefield maps. It intercepts all the data, in this case HOA funds, and redirects everything to Karen's personal accounts. Same principle as telecommunications fraud, just with landscaping invoices instead of phone calls. The pattern was breathtakingly systematic. Every major assessment Karen had imposed over 3 years corresponded exactly to personal improvements on her various properties. The Scottsdale HOA funded her kitchen remodel. The Tempe Association paid for her bathroom renovation. Our neighborhood had essentially financed her entire lifestyle upgrade, right down to that ridiculous white Escalade. But here's where Karen's lack of technical sophistication became her death sentence. She used the same Wells Fargo account for all 3 fraud schemes. Every transaction created an electronic trail linking her criminal activities across multiple jurisdictions. Agent Martinez practically purred with satisfaction when I mapped out the digital evidence. Federal prosecutors love electronic paper trails. Defense attorneys can claim coincidence with cash transactions, but it's impossible to accidentally transfer the same amounts from 3 different HOA accounts to your personal checking account 47 times over 3 years. Here's the financial crime nugget most people never learn. Pattern evidence trumps individual transaction disputes in federal court every single time. You don't need to prove every single theft when the pattern clearly shows systematic criminal behavior. IRS investigator Rosalie was simultaneously building the tax evasion case, his calculator clicking like a telegraph as he totaled Karen's unreported consulting income. The man chain-smoked menthol cigarettes with the dedication of a 1940s film noir detective, stepping outside every hour while muttering things like fraudulent basis adjustment and willful tax defiance. Your neighbor owes approximately $67,000 in back taxes before penalties and interest, Rosalie announced, cigarette smoke clinging to his government-issued blazer like cheap cologne. That's assuming she didn't hide additional income streams we haven't discovered yet. By day 3, the investigation had grown beyond Karen into something that sounded like a bad movie plot. Agent Martinez spread out a wall-sized chart showing connections between HOA board presidents across 4 states, all running identical embezzlement schemes with suspiciously similar shell company names. Karen learned this system from someone, Martinez explained, tapping the chart with a red pen that clicked against her coffee mug. Whitmore Property Solutions, Henderson Home Services, Garcia Grounds Management. Notice the pattern? Same initials as the board presidents, same business models, same banking structures. The scope was staggering. What started as petty neighborhood harassment had accidentally exposed a criminal franchise operation targeting homeowner associations across the Southwest. Someone was teaching HOA board members how to systematically steal from their neighbors, then taking a percentage of the profits. Corporate fraud training seminars, Rosalie muttered, returning from his latest nicotine break with the philosophical air of someone who'd seen every variety of human greed. They probably advertise it as maximizing HOA revenue streams or creative community funding solutions. That evening, after the federal agents packed their files and headed back to Phoenix, I sat on my back patio trying to process what I'd learned. The desert sunset painted everything in shades of orange and purple, while coyotes called from the distant mountains like nature's own criminals planning their next heist. Karen's ridiculous Wi-Fi complaint had accidentally triggered a federal investigation that would expose dozens of criminals stealing millions from homeowners across multiple states. And somehow, a grieving widower with a ham radio hobby had become the key witness in taking down an entire criminal network. The irony was delicious. Karen had called the cops on me for changing my Wi-Fi name. Now the FBI was using her own electronic evidence to build federal cases that would put her and her criminal mentors in prison for decades. Karen made bail Monday morning, and by Monday night, she'd officially declared war on both physics and federal law enforcement. I was monitoring my security cameras from the kitchen, a paranoid habit I'd developed since the FBI transformed my house into Evidence Command Central, when motion detectors started chiming like Christmas bells around 2:17 a.m. The night vision footage showed a figure skulking across my backyard, bolt cutters glinting in infrared light like some suburban ninja's weapon of choice. Karen Whitmore, criminal mastermind, had apparently decided that destroying my ham radio antenna would magically make her federal charges vanish like a bad magic trick. I settled back with Sarah's coffee mug, still warm from my midnight investigation work, and watched through the camera feed as Karen attacked my antenna guy wires with all the technical expertise of someone performing brain surgery with a chainsaw. The metallic snapping sounds echoed across the desert quiet, mixing with her colorful commentary that would have made a sailor blush. But Karen wasn't finished with her midnight home improvement project. After mangling my antenna like a frustrated toddler destroying Lincoln logs, she moved on to artistic expression, spray painting criminal across my mailbox in letters so crooked they looked like a drunk monkey's finger painting. The chemical smell of aerosol paint mixed with her suffocating perfume cloud to create this toxic atmospheric cocktail that probably violated 3 different EPA regulations. 27 minutes of suburban vandalism later, Karen trudged back to her house, apparently convinced she'd struck a decisive blow against the vast federal conspiracy targeting innocent HOA presidents everywhere. I called Agent Martinez at 6 a.m., barely containing my laughter. Agent Martinez, I have high-definition footage of Karen committing approximately 6 felonies: breaking and entering, vandalism, destruction of FCC-licensed equipment. It's like a criminal activity greatest hits album. Save every frame, Martinez replied, her coffee cup clinking against computer keys in the background. Desperate criminals always escalate predictably. She's building our case faster than we can file paperwork. Tuesday morning brought Karen's creative writing phase. A police report claiming I had stalked and threatened her with physical violence during a confrontation at Fry's supermarket. The fictional masterpiece included vivid details about my alleged 3:47 p.m. Sunday harassment campaign, complete with descriptions of intimidating gestures in the produce section and threatening comments about federal retaliation. Pure imagination, except for one tiny problem. I'd been getting a root canal at Dr. Patel's office during her imaginary grocery store thriller. Hard to threaten someone over organic bananas when you're drooling Novocaine in a dental chair 20 miles away, but Karen had never let reality interfere with a good story. She'd also recruited Deborah Finch, her trembling treasurer, to corroborate the fantasy with a sworn witness statement. According to Deborah's perjured affidavit, she'd personally observed my fictional stalking behavior across multiple store aisles. Here's a legal reality most people don't grasp. Filing false police reports and signing perjured affidavits are separate federal felonies that carry mandatory minimums. Simple takeaway: lying to federal investigators doesn't just add charges, it multiplies your prison time exponentially. Agent Martinez actually laughed when I forwarded the police report. Your neighbor just gave us 2 more felonies each for her and Finch. False reports, perjury, witness tampering. She's playing federal crime bingo. Wednesday escalated to financial desperation. A certified letter arrived demanding immediate payment of my bogus $2,847 assessment, plus a brand new $3,000 emergency community safety fee to address security threats created by disruptive residents. The beautiful circular logic made my telecommunications engineer brain appreciate Karen's complete disconnect from reality. Steal money to pay lawyers to defend against stealing money. It was like watching someone try to put out a fire with gasoline while insisting water was the real problem. Tom Patterson called that evening, his CPA training practically smoking from computational overload. Miles, she sent identical assessments to 31 households, $3,000 each. She's attempting to extort $93,000 in legal defense funds without admitting they're legal defense funds. Thursday night brought Karen's Hail Mary play. I was checking my mailbox at sunset when that white Escalade approached with all the stealth of a freight train. Karen's window rolled down, revealing a woman who looked like she'd been surviving on stress hormones and desperation for weeks. The confident neighborhood dictator had been replaced by a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. "Miles," she called, her voice stripped of all authority. "We need to discuss this situation." I approached with my phone recording as she fumbled with a manila envelope thick as a brick. The evening air carried the scent of cooling desert sage mixed with Karen's panic sweat, a combination that somehow smelled like fear itself. "Look, I know we've had our differences," she began, hands shaking as she slid the envelope across her center console. "But maybe we can resolve this neighbor to neighbor." Inside, $5,100 bills and a handwritten note reading, "For your trouble, let's let sleeping dogs lie, $5,000 cash, direct bribery attempt, on video, while under federal investigation." Karen had just committed felony obstruction of justice in front of the key witness in her own federal case. I stared at that money, then at Karen's desperate, hollow eyes, and realized she still didn't understand the magnitude of her situation. "Karen," I said as gently as possible, "you really should call your lawyer." "What lawyer?" she whispered, her voice breaking like autumn leaves. "I can't afford a lawyer anymore." For just a moment, looking at this broken woman who'd destroyed her own life through pure arrogance, I felt something approaching sympathy. Then I remembered Mrs. Rosalie's doubled assessment and Tom's financial stress, and that sympathy evaporated like morning dew in the Arizona sun. Friday morning brought Karen's final desperate gambit, delivered with all the subtlety of a tactical nuclear strike on a butterfly garden. The restraining order petition landed in my mailbox like a legal hand grenade, accompanied by a stack of evidence that would have impressed Hollywood special effects artists. Karen had apparently spent her remaining free time crafting an alternate reality where I was some kind of electronic stalker mastermind using ham radio equipment for neighborhood surveillance operations. According to her sworn statement, I had been systematically monitoring private communications, photographing her property with telephoto lenses, and creating a hostile environment through persistent electronic harassment. The petition included doctored security photos showing me lurking suspiciously near her property, images that were actually me checking my own mailbox, creatively cropped to look sinister. But Karen's masterpiece was the request for a court order forcing removal of all my surveillance equipment, including my ham radio antenna, security cameras, and any electronic devices capable of intercepting private communications. She was asking a judge to strip away my federal communications license and constitutional property rights based on fabricated evidence and paranoid fantasies. Agent Martinez called within an hour of receiving my forwarded copy. "Mr. Delacroix, your neighbor just committed perjury in federal court documents. She's also attempting to interfere with a federal investigation by removing key evidence, your security system that recorded her crimes." The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday, giving Karen 4 days to launch her final smear campaign. And launch it she did, with the desperate energy of someone watching their entire world collapse in slow motion. Karen created fake Facebook profiles targeting our neighborhood Facebook group, posting warnings about dangerous electronics equipment and suspicious resident behavior. The posts included grainy photos of my antenna with captions like, "Is this legal?" and "What is he really doing with all that equipment?" She spread rumors through Nextdoor that I was a disgraced telecommunications employee who'd been fired for inappropriate surveillance activities. The story grew with each telling. I was supposedly using my technical background for identity theft, credit card fraud, maybe even corporate espionage. The neighborhood grapevine carried whispers that I was mentally unstable from grief and potentially dangerous to community safety. Karen had weaponized my wife's death, turning my greatest loss into ammunition for her character assassination campaign. But here's where Karen's desperation finally met its match. Our neighborhood had been watching her criminal behavior for months. Mrs. Rosalie organized a counter-campaign that would have impressed political consultants. "That woman has been stealing from us for years," Mrs. Rosalie announced at an impromptu gathering in Tom Patterson's garage Tuesday morning before the hearing. The smell of motor oil and coffee mixed with righteous indignation as 17 neighbors shared their Karen horror stories. Miles is the only one brave enough to fight back. Mike Patterson, our retired detective, had been quietly conducting his own investigation. "I've documented Karen's harassment pattern targeting 5 different residents over 3 years," he reported, spreading photos across Tom's workbench. "She uses the same playbook every time: false violations, financial pressure, then character assassination when people fight back." The restraining order hearing became Karen's public execution. Judge Patricia Williams looked like she'd rather be performing root canals than listening to suburban drama, but her expression shifted when Karen began presenting her evidence. The doctored photos, the paranoid accusations, the request to confiscate federally licensed equipment, it all painted a picture of someone completely disconnected from reality. My attorney, Rebecca Santos, provided courtesy of the FBI Victim Assistance Program, systematically dismantled Karen's fabricated case. Security footage showing the real context of those stalking photos. FCC documentation proving my equipment was legal and properly licensed. bank records demonstrating that I was the victim, not the perpetrator, of financial crimes. Your Honor, Attorney Santos concluded, Ms. Whitmore is using this court to harass the key witness in her own federal criminal case. This petition is nothing more than obstruction of justice disguised as civil procedure. Judge Williams studied the evidence for exactly 43 seconds before delivering her verdict. Petition denied. Ms. Whitmore, filing false statements in court documents is perjury. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office. But the real fireworks started when Agent Martinez approached the defense table immediately after the hearing. Karen's face went white as desert sand when Martinez flashed her federal credentials. Ms. Whitmore, we have additional charges to discuss: obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, perjury in federal proceedings. You're looking at significant prison time. Karen's knees buckled right there in the courthouse hallway, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking like cheap plaster. This isn't fair, she sobbed, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I just wanted him to leave me alone. Ma'am, Agent Martinez replied with the patience of someone who'd arrested 1,000 desperate criminals. Mr. Delacroix never bothered you. You called the police on him, remember? That's when the final piece of Karen's criminal empire collapsed. Agent Martinez revealed that Deborah Finch had flipped, providing evidence of the broader HOA fraud network in exchange for a plea deal. Jerry Walsh, the third board member, had already confessed to receiving kickbacks from Karen's shell company. The criminal conspiracy that had started with a Wi-Fi name was about to culminate in federal court with multiple defendants, millions in stolen funds, and enough evidence to wallpaper the courthouse. Karen stood in that hallway, surrounded by federal agents, finally understanding that her suburban kingdom was built on quicksand, and tomorrow the whole neighborhood would watch it sink. The community meeting was Agent Martinez's idea, but the execution was pure neighborhood justice with federal backup. We want maximum transparency, she'd explained during our final planning session. When taxpayers see their money recovered and criminals held accountable, it reinforces faith in the system. Plus, public arrests send a message to other HOA fraudsters across the state. Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. sharp, the Willowbrook Community Center filled beyond capacity. 47 residents packed folding chairs while local news crews set up equipment along the walls. The smell of industrial coffee mixed with nervous excitement and the faint scent of Karen's omnipresent perfume as she entered fashionably late, still projecting authority despite everything crumbling around her. Agent Martinez and 2 other federal agents positioned themselves along the back wall, their presence adding an electric tension to the evening air. Local police officers flanked the exits, officially for security, but everyone knew they were there to prevent any dramatic escape attempts. Karen swept in wearing her finest pastel pantsuit, clipboard clutched like a shield, white Escalade parked prominently in the fire lane because even facing federal charges couldn't cure her entitlement syndrome. She took her usual spot at the front table, arranging papers with theatrical precision while projecting the confidence of someone who still believed she could talk her way out of anything. I stood at the presentation podium, laptop connected to a large screen that would display 3 years of financial evidence to the entire neighborhood. The projector hummed quietly while residents settled into their seats, coffee cups clinking and nervous whispers filling the room like pre-game energy at a championship match. Good evening, neighbors, I began, my voice carrying across the room with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. Tonight we're going to review some interesting patterns in our HOA financial management. The first slide showed Karen's voting record cross-referenced with payments to Whitmore Property Solutions. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd as the correlation became undeniable. Every major assessment corresponded to personal improvements on Karen's properties. $47,000, I announced, paid by this HOA to a company owned by our board president, approved by votes she cast herself. Karen's face cycled through confusion, anger, and panic like a traffic light having a seizure. This is harassment, she interrupted, her voice reaching frequencies that probably interfered with local radio transmissions. These are lies and manipulated evidence. But the evidence spoke louder than her protests. Bank records displayed on the big screen showing Karen's Wells Fargo account receiving payments within days of each HOA emergency assessment. Insurance claims filed for the same repairs the HOA had already funded. Tax returns showing unreported income from her fraudulent consulting fees. Mrs. Rosalie stood up in the third row, her elderly voice trembling with righteous fury. You doubled my assessment this year. I couldn't afford groceries some months because of your fake emergencies. Tom Patterson rose next, his CPA training adding professional weight to his accusations. Karen, you voted yourself nearly $50,000 over 3 years while claiming the HOA was financially struggling. That's theft, plain and simple. The room erupted in angry voices as neighbors connected the dots between their financial hardships and Karen's lifestyle improvements. The sound of folding chairs scraping against linoleum mixed with increasingly hostile questions about yacht club memberships, vacation trips, and that ridiculous Escalade with vanity plates. Karen tried desperately to regain control, standing and waving her clipboard like a surrender flag. Everyone needs to calm down. There are perfectly reasonable explanations for... Ms. Whitmore, Agent Martinez's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. There's no reasonable explanation for systematic embezzlement. The federal agent stepped forward, badge visible, while Karen's face drained of color faster than a bathtub with the plug pulled. The confident HOA dictator finally realized she was standing in a room full of people she'd stolen from, surrounded by federal agents who'd been building a case against her for weeks. You're under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement, Martinez announced, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority while handcuffs clicked in the sudden silence. Karen's knees finally gave out. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing like a child caught stealing cookies, mascara streaming down her face as the reality of federal prison time hit her like a physical blow. Please, she gasped, looking around the room at neighbors she'd been exploiting for years. I have children. I made mistakes, but I was trying to improve the neighborhood. The money was supposed to benefit everyone. Mike Patterson, our retired detective, stood up with the satisfied expression of someone who'd seen justice served thousands of times. Karen, you stole our money to pay for your own house. That doesn't benefit anyone except you. Agent Martinez continued reading charges as 2 other federal agents flanked Karen's chair. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, perjury. The list continued like a criminal achievement award ceremony, while news cameras captured every moment of Karen's complete breakdown. Her white Escalade was already being hooked to a federal asset forfeiture tow truck, its vanity plates HOA1, a perfect symbol of misplaced priorities. As federal agents led Karen away in handcuffs, she turned back toward the room with desperate eyes. This isn't over. I know people. I have lawyers. Agent Martinez smiled with professional satisfaction. Ma'am, your lawyers are going to need lawyers. The community center erupted in applause as Karen disappeared through the exit doors, her reign of suburban terror officially ended by federal law enforcement and one stubborn widower with a ham radio antenna. Justice, it turned out, tasted like victory coffee and sounded like neighbors finally free to breathe again. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where this whole mess started, watching the sunrise paint our neighborhood in shades of gold and possibility. Sarah's coffee mug still rests in my hands, but now it holds something sweeter than grief. The satisfaction of a community healed and justice served. Karen got 3 years in federal prison, plus $150,000 in restitution, to be split among the victims across 3 HOAs. Deborah Finch received 18 months for conspiracy and cooperation credit for flipping on the larger fraud network. Jerry Walsh got a year in minimum security and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board anywhere in Arizona. But the real victory wasn't the prison sentences. It was watching our neighborhood transform from Karen's personal kingdom into an actual community. The new democratically elected board implemented Miles's Law. Any expenditure over $500 requires a neighborhood vote with full financial disclosure. Monthly financial reports get published online where everyone can see exactly where their money goes. We even hired an independent auditor who reviews all contracts before any votes, ensuring no board member can ever again vote money into their own pockets. Mrs. Rosalie became our new treasurer, bringing the same fierce attention to detail she'd used raising 5 children on a factory worker's salary. Tom Patterson chairs the Finance Committee, his CPA training finally being used to protect neighbors instead of prosecute them. Mike Patterson heads our new Community Integrity Committee, basically our anti-corruption watchdog group that makes sure future Karens get stopped before they can steal anyone's grocery money. The FBI's investigation expanded into a multi-state operation that exposed 43 fraudulent HOA board members across the Southwest. Karen's criminal mentors, The people who'd been teaching embezzlement techniques at those fake revenue optimization seminars are now facing RICO charges that could put them away for decades. Agent Martinez tells me our case became a training model for other FBI offices nationwide. The Willowbrook method, they call it, how one technical-minded resident with good documentation skills can unravel an entire criminal network. My evidence-gathering techniques are now taught to federal agents investigating HOA fraud cases across the country. The personal healing surprised me most. Fighting Karen's corruption had given me purpose beyond my grief, something larger than the hole Sarah's death had left in my daily routine. My ham radio antenna, repaired and upgraded with neighborhood support, now connects me to a network of people fighting similar battles against petty tyrants and neighborhood bullies from coast to coast. The Willowbrook Transparency Scholarship gets funded annually by recovered fraud money, awarding college grants to students studying telecommunications law, financial justice, or public administration ethics. Our first recipient was Maria Santos, a local high school senior who wants to become an FBI financial crimes investigator. She says, our story inspired her to protect communities from predators like Karen. Property values in our neighborhood increased 12% after the corruption cleanup, as word spread about our transparent, honest governance. Young families started moving in, drawn by the community garden we planted where Karen's illegal surveillance equipment used to monitor our daily activities. The garden produces vegetables we donate to the local food bank. Karen's former criminal headquarters now feeds hungry families instead of financing fraud schemes. Every October we hold Transparency Day, a neighborhood celebration where we review the year's finances, elect board positions, and educate new residents about their rights. Kids run around playing games while adults learn about recognizing financial fraud and standing up to authoritarian neighbors. The whole event tastes like barbecue smoke and smells like community pride. Last month, residents from 7 other states contacted me through my ham radio setup, asking for help with their own HOA corruption problems. Turns out Karen types are everywhere, and people are finally learning they don't have to suffer in silence when neighborhood tyrants decide to steal their money and peace of mind. My Wi-Fi network name? It's now Justice Served Who Is Next, because bullies everywhere should know that communities won't tolerate their abuse forever. So here's my message to anyone dealing with HOA nightmares, neighborhood tyrants, or petty dictators who think their clipboards give them unlimited power. Document everything, stand your ground, and remember that federal law enforcement loves taking down criminals who prey on regular people trying to live quiet lives.
Mom could have easily let us for $75 fry slide, wrong shades of black mailbox, grass half an inch too long. Most of us could have just paid it and moved on, keep the peace, right? But there's something about being targeted when you're already down. When you have just buried a wife and you are trying to find some quiet corner in the world to hell in. And Karen, she saw that and decided to press harder. The thing about people like Karen Whitmore is they scout you staying quiet and isolated. They bank on the idea that you won't compare notes with your neighbors, that you won't dig into the financial records, that you should observe the punishment and stay quiet. But Mayo had 30 years in telecommunications. He understood systems, documentations, how things connect to other things. And when Karen actually called 911 because of a Wi-Fi name, she handled him exactly what he needed. I get messages from people all over the country dealing with their own Karen situations. Different neighbors, same playbook, targeting, selective enforcement, financial gains, as more people feel completely powerless against this. Have you dealt with something like this in the HOAs? Someone who seemed untouchable until they wasn't? I'd be curious to hear about it in the comments. If this story intrigued you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more of this, because trust me, there are plenty more where this came from. Sometimes the best revenge is just patience and a really good filing system.